Hello and welcome to the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. Today's guest is CEO, Master Shaman, and founder of Blue Morpho Retreats, co-founder of One Energy Global and Source Independent Entertainment. He is a visionary leader, speaker, author, and renowned master shaman. He is an international leader of Amazonian sustainability and conservation. Welcome back to the show, Hamilton Souther.
Thank you, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on your show. It's incredible.
Absolutely, man. Well, I remember our last podcast and it was fantastic. You got to dive really deep. You're a very fascinating person. A lot of people are aware of you and they hold you in high regard. So I certainly do as well. So it's great to have you on the show. I guess let's start a little bit with your background, and then maybe you can fill us in with what's going on where you are, because I've been doing a lot of shows trying to keep up to date with the coronavirus stuff. And, a lot of it's turned out to not be as bad as what's been projected, with the death rates and following that really closely. But your experience is exactly maybe what could have been. You experienced, a very challenging time. So I'm curious if you can just kind of fill us in a little bit.
Sure. In terms of my background, I moved into the Peruvian Amazon in my early 20s after I graduated from college studying physical and cultural anthropology, and was super interested in the Amazonian medicinal plants and Amazonian shamanism. And I ended up having an opportunity to apprentice and study under incredible shamans. And we opened up Blue Morpho Center in early 2000s. And we were some of the first people to really bring Amazonian plant medicine to, the forefront of spiritual exploration and personal discovery. It was a wild journey, amazing, incredible journey, developing Blue Morpho over the years. And it really centered from my early 20s into my early 40s, the majority of my life here in the Amazon. And it's been, an incredible time to be a part of this transformation of this part of the world, and also see everything that's going on down here. And to your point about coronavirus, it's been one of the places hit hardest in the world. And we have lived through really the what people described of as the doomsday scenario with it. And it was unbelievably intense. The city shut down for a series of months, and really since March. So March through really last month, it was unbelievably intense, really under police control and military control, trying to maintain stability. Literally, the city shut down in every way you could possibly imagine other than the most essential necessities. And we had the highest infection rate in the world for a period of time. So we had over 90% infection rate, and the really impossible way to even count the number of deaths associated with it. I personally know countless people that passed on during this period of time. Every single family that I know and have been friends with over the last 20 years has lost at least someone to the virus. And the majority of the people, obviously, within those families also contracted it. So we've gotten to see people that have, almost no symptoms, all the way to the people that have died through this experience. And it's like living through, I don't know, the apocalypse. It's like a mini apocalypse, the intensity of the transformation from literally 1 week to the next. Life for 19 years here just disappeared. What was the flow and the growth of the city just gone. And then all of a sudden, it was this, new existence living with coronavirus and the intensity associated with it, all the way to the point of hospitals collapsing from the number of people and just the inability to be able to treat everybody, to the people deciding to treat themselves inside their own homes and utilizing natural medicines as a way to try to confront the illness. And then, there was even starvation within the city, which is unbelievable. People who literally just ran out of the ability to survive. And then all of these micro humanitarian movements from the people for the people that just came out, which was incredibly heartwarming to see the people really try to support each other to get through this and come together as a society is sort of what's happened. And just in the last month, the newest reports are that we're one of the first cities in the world to now have 0 cases of coronavirus. The first wave has run its course, And the big question is, how long will that last? And is there a second wave coming?
Wow, man. Well, first of all, that's awful to hear. It sounds incredibly challenging experience, and, talking to some of my Native American friends, I guess they were experiencing the coronavirus worse than the general population as well. Andreas Kalcker, who was on the show, and he was talking about how he was having amazing success with chlorine dioxide in South America. And he said they were experiencing, a much rougher time with the virus. So they wanted to get it out there. And a lot of doctors, I guess he has 10,000 doctors underneath him. So hopefully that will be accessible if indeed that's going to happen. What are the treatments that work? Because he was saying some of them was up to 100% success, unless they were, he said, really, really at the end. Other than that, they were able to have a full recovery. So apparently there's 10,000 doctors underneath them. So hopefully if something does happen again, we can be better prepared. But it's interesting because I haven't heard one of those stories yet. It's usually been something on the other side where they're inflated, or there's something screwy with going on with the testing, or something shady going on. But yeah, even now talking to Joe Martino, and he's interviewed one of these doctors from China, saying that they were talking about engineering the virus, that she was actually one of those people on the team. So it's a very challenging time. There's so much information out there. There's so much trauma and harm in various different ways. We're very polarized right now. And what your work is really healing people. It's, inviting people down to the Amazon to have these transformational experiences. So how has your work changed, and what is the, I guess, the message or the feeling from the shamans or the indigenous people down there?
Well, I'll answer that kind of in reverse. The shamans have been seeing this kind of apocalyptic scenario coming for hundreds of years and have been talking about it. And, the general, I think, sort of ethos of shamanism across the world is live in balance with nature and live in harmony with the totality of sort of the overall forces. And there's this, polarity of forces, and this idea to try to be more or less in balance with those forces. Obviously, there's certain kinds of shamanism that fall into sort of the darker sides, and others that are more about the medicine and the lighter sides. And obviously that is its own concept of balance as well. But the general theory is, as a society at large, you have to live within the parameters of the balance of the great forces. And I think in the modern world and scientific world, that could just be seen as Earth and nature itself. And, the Earth has been evolving and ultimately evolved humans, and humans now have lived this great mythological journey of the mind for, the last couple 100,000 years at least. And along the way, the shamans have been saying, hey, massive societies out there, you have to pay attention to nature or this is going to come. And I think that, most of them were pretty prepared for something like this to happen. It's been within their mythology for quite some time. So I think that, in our case, we've been kind of watching society not pay attention to really some core, figures. There's some core statistics that you would just look at to just kind of gauge the direction that it's going, whether that be, just the health of the overall planet, the different aspects of climate change, et cetera. I mean, there's just so many different ones that you could ultimately look at. Things were looking greatly out of balance. And then, so for this to come is just I don't know, it's a reminder, and it's also confirmation of what the seers have been seeing for hundreds of years. So we kind of looked at it and treated it that way. And we were always preparing for something like this because of that. So in our ceremonial experiences and our visionary experiences, we never treated modern society as being very stable. We always considered it to be, something that's really quite amazing, but also incredibly unstable and topsy-turvy. And, throughout my own studies of history, it seems like war has really been the giant thread through history. Yeah, I know there's obviously an unbelievable series of times of peace and unbelievable times of beauty throughout that, but the main push and force has always been this idea of dominance and supremacy throughout the world. And so it seems like that this is just another expression ultimately of that continued thread of, an ever shifting concept of conflict amongst humans and how that conflict ultimately expresses itself. So that's kind of, I think, the way that the shamans have been treating it. And so we've been, just preparing and ready. And in terms of our work, well, March 16th, when Peru declared a national state of emergency, Blue Morpho and the center that I started back in the early 2000s for the first time ever just stopped. It ended. That was it. There was literally no way to practice anymore. And so we quickly got our entire company together to really start to follow what we thought of would be the, strictest protocols to try to stay safe from COVID and from the spread of the disease, as we didn't know how lethal it would really be, because it was just unknowns at the beginning. It was just all misinformation and unknowns. And so we split into two groups to try to cover the different infrastructure that we have and work together as a group. And what we did, which I thought was really amazing, was that we went back to the traditional medicine to stay healthy through the period of time of COVID. So the group that I led actually continued the practices of all the shamanic medicines that we used as a preventive way, and then the visionary medicines as a way of a healing way to deal with the uncertainty and the traumas throughout the period of time that we were all together during this kind of crazy disrupt. So I actually got to, for the first time, share with our workers a lot of the different practices that we would share with our groups that would come down for healing, that had always been interested, but never themselves had an opportunity or a reason to partake in this kind of medicine. And down here, it's not really considered something for exploration. It's considered something as a medicine. So the locals wait until there's a reason to participate. And so we, as a group, we started to do shamanic dietas every month as a way to purify the body and to boost the immune system, utilizing a variety of medicinal plants, many of them unknown to the West. Most of the plants down here that are famous are the visionary ones that people talk about. So we actually turned to shamanic dietas as a way of purifying the body and keeping the body healthy. And it's also an unbelievably stabilizing experience. So you find courage and strength through the process of the dieta. And so we did that together as a group. And then in the case of real traumas and real losses, we would hold visionary ceremonies to deal with the trauma. And so we really turned to the indigenous medicine as a way to maintain solidarity and strength through this time.
Wow. Thanks for that. Thanks for all that, man. There's so many different directions and questions I have for you. So I'm just going to kind of reel off a whole bunch of stuff that I've been thinking, and you can pick apart what you'd like to reply to.
Sure.
Ayahuasca is such a powerful experience. Over time, I've seen the good in it and how it's transformed people, and I've seen the dark side where some people and travelers or shamans can abuse it, or some people can go into it for the wrong reasons. But for me, it's been incredibly powerful and impactful, and that's mostly what I experienced when people have done it with respect and all of that kind of thing. So for me, when I have those experiences, or even if I'm lucky enough to have one in meditation, the place that you go to is beyond words, and it's like infinite love, and somehow everything is okay. That piece of art behind you, I completely understand it. And, it's this most magical, safe place, but it can also be terrifying as well. But you've been to that space more often than most people that I know. When I come back from it, it's like I always like kind of hear like the sound in my ear, like it's going home. Like I hear like home, 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 like this a little bit of thing. And the shamans and the work that they do is so incredibly powerful. It's like the fact that they're able to navigate this space and be standing. It's like, to me, it's more impressive than being like the heavyweight champion of the world UFC fighter. It's like the fact that you're standing up right now and you can navigate is beyond me. Like this is, I don't know what you're doing, but I'll take all the help you can give me. So, and looking at what's going on here, there's really challenging times, really challenging polarization. There's loss, there's intense fear. And ideally, the message when I come back is one of hope and empowerment. But one of the questions that I struggle with being human is like, why the hell is there so much friggin' suffering? Why is there so much suffering? Why is there so much evil? Why are all these challenging things out there? And some of the teachings will say, come back to yourself, like everything, you're creating everything essentially from your consciousness, like a hologram. So I always think, well, why would I create all this suffering? They say sometimes it's like a video game or something like that. And so I'm just yammering. But the basic question I want to throw at you is, how is that kind of experience or medicine empowered you to navigate such a challenging time as you've gone through and what you're witnessing in the communities you're around?
Well, I'll start with the idea of just being able to walk around within the space. That was my biggest thing too when I first started. I couldn't believe it. I got called to this kind of medicine form through the first ceremony that I did in 2002, 2001, 2002, and I was so overwhelmed by the experience. I couldn't believe that anybody could actually get to the place where you could stand up and or walk and or even just be okay. It was so throttling. It was so intense. So I completely understand. And, ultimately, little by little, you learn how to maintain your center from your consciousness, not so much from the reflection of everything that's going on around you. And you realize that you're in a space where I think most people find their center typically from a perspective of the three-dimensional space. And, the drawing that's behind me is really, it's a tapestry of the multidimensional space that you typically see in these kinds of ceremonies. And so it becomes 3D itself, and then it becomes super multi-D, and you're in it, and you're just, you're surrounded in it. You're made of it. You're kind of in, through, and all around it. And you end up becoming comfortable in that, very much like the way I think an astronaut would become comfortable with being in zero gravity. And it just takes time and practice. So, once you're a couple hundred ceremonies in to training, you kind of get the hang of it. And, most people just in their life don't get to have that, that kind of experience. So it just takes a long time, and it takes a practice of dietas, and it takes a practice of ceremony to be able to get there. And so that ultimately is how you figure out how to navigate it, and you navigate it through intention. And that's a kind of mindset that we're not really taught. We use intention in the West, to guide ourselves to certain decisions. And then after that, we're kind of on autopilot. Like you decide you're going to drive somewhere, and then you just drive there, but the shaman gets around through intention the whole time, holding that intention. So through ceremony, you learn how to hold intention literally during the entirety of the ceremony itself. And that's how you navigate. So it's not just the decision to get in the car and go somewhere, but you're literally driving yourself to that place the whole time, and you're aware of that. And when you have a room of people that you're working with, you're doing that same job for literally everybody at the same time. So you're collectively guiding and directing through intention, and you use supernatural forces to be able to do that, which the shamans call spirits. And I like to think of more as supernatural forces, just because spirits seem to confuse a lot of people what you're talking about, just because of, I think, a whole lot of different mythology around it. But these forces are there, and you ultimately call upon those forces and wield those forces to, be able to guide the ceremony and guide the experience that people are having. If you're a healing shaman, you do that for the purposes of healing people. And the way you would do that, it depends on the illness that the person's suffering. So psychological illnesses get treated different than physical illnesses. And ultimately, it's through the journey that the person takes and the visions that they have, how the healing unfolds or takes place. Like you say, there's this coming home, and then this coming home back to yourself that kind of takes place. So I think that's the first way I'd unpick that. The impact's total. When you embrace these kinds of practices, they become you, and they teach you a series of skills and understandings about life that you just you become. And so you live it as part of you. You understand the good with the bad. You understand the light with the dark. You understand ultimately the nature and the origin of your own consciousness. And the beauty of these kinds of practices, very different to a lot of other mythologies out there, is that they really shatter belief instead of creating belief. And that can be positive, and it can also be negative, because people at the same time are very fast to recreate belief. So it's really easy in these ceremonies to delude yourself, have these big aha moments, and then decide that that's ultimately now the way things are, and kind of, put it in that big brackets and just sum that up. But ultimately, if you allow yourself to keep exploring, you'll find that the beliefs that you have ultimately fall apart. And many of the things that you mentioned are beliefs along the way that I've confronted, like the holograph or the mirror or the I'm creating all of this. And ultimately, I came to realize that we are the creators of all of this. And that the way that you described the nature of the mirror of consciousness is true, but it's true for all of us at the same time. And the nature of evil, I've found to be the nature of our own mythology. And it's our own unwillingness to collectively to deal with fundamental facts or fundamental truths just about what we are. And we have yet to out-evolve them. And so sadly, collectively within our mythology, the power of darkness and the power of negativity is so much faster to destruction than the power of love and the power of healing and the power of growth. And I can see that in almost anything that is part of just the modern world. So think about how long it takes to build a building compared to demolish it. Think how long it takes to create a human being and have it grow up to become an elder versus its life being taken by a disease or by an accident. Takes seconds for something to die. They can, takes hundreds of years to grow a hectare of forest to its real primary state. And it can be taken down with bulldozers and chainsaws in minutes. Fire can destroy something immediately. And it's been a paradox of life that I've, struggled with, but also have tried to understand that for some reason, Earth itself has the capacity to continue life, but destroy huge aspects of it at any given time, much faster than it seems to grow it. So Earth is its own, we are of the Earth life force, and Earth as a life force has this ability to spawn itself and also destroy itself simultaneously. And when you live in a forest or you live in nature, you see that around you. You see that the majority of, like in the Amazon, the majority of what you see looks like the living. But if you take your imagination and you look at the forest on a cellular level, well over half the forest there is dead. It's all the fallen leaves. It's all the fallen branches. It's all the fallen trees. It's all the decomposition that's becoming the soil in its own right. And everything is ultimately living off it. And so the life lives off of the dead, and the soil gets its nutrients from the forest itself. And it's this ever living cycle of life and death. And it's something that we as a species just have not dealt with. We've not come to terms with it yet. And then individually, through this idea of what I talked about already, which I think of as like the ever conflict of war, has not been ultimately surrendered within ourselves. And so that massive conflict has us in this cycle where we're all creating it together. And until we're ready to stop creating it and out evolve it, we're going to continue to suffer it. And I don't think it's just on your shoulders or on my shoulders or anybody's shoulders. And then from, thousands of years ago, we have the idea of a messianic means of salvation, which I think actually removes the responsibility of that salvation from ourselves. And so regardless of the culture you're coming from, if you believe that there's somebody else who is going to ultimately fix the problem, then you don't have to take responsibility for it, especially as a collective. And I think that's where we find ourselves now, where we need to take responsibility for this as a collective. There's talks of a vaccine for COVID. I've yet to see it actually exist and happen yet. And so if there isn't going to be a solution for this yet, we as a collective community are now have to face something that, isn't just one nationality or another. It's not just one race or another. It's not just one group of people or another. It's literally going to ultimately affect everybody. And it's a big evolutionary wake up call. So I've taken this to the collective we, the we as a species, the we as humanity, if there's real truth to the meaning of that word. It's we of our own evolution, and it's we of our collective mythology with the responsibility to ultimately do something about this and make a decision about the suffering. It's our decision. So we as a group, in terms of the people that I interact with, we treat suffering as something that we try to mitigate, and we use love and healing as a means to try to help others see a way to transcend it. And when we face suffering of all different kinds, we try to help each other in a positive way to be able to plane through it and ultimately rise above and out of it. And, that seems to be a continual process because there just seems to be so much pain and trauma and difficulty that we are collectively as humanity creating for ourselves.
Wow, that's a very beautiful answer. I agree with it. And I think that for a lot of people too, it's the emotional part of it, like just seeing the suffering and not know what to do. So there's cognitive dissonance there. It's just like not look at it. Like, why do we have starvation? 9.1 million people. The easiest solution, food, rice, like it's not very complicated. I feel like it's an opportunity to extend our compassion. Even when COVID started coming out, I was like, yeah, like it's sad people are going to die, but 9.1 million people starving to death. That's a horrendous way to die. And we know what the solution is. It's just so ludicrous that why haven't we put any kind of media power to that? Is it those people don't count as much? Is it we want to suppress that country so we can take the resources? Like, what is the root of cognitive dissonance, having cognitive dissonance and not caring about that, or the human trafficking that's going on in the world with such high numbers? And so I guess a follow-up question is just something that I struggle with dealing with things like this is, what do we do as an individual to create the solution? Like if I'm not aware there's a problem, right, I can't create a solution for it. Kind of stick your head in the sand. But some people say, you just focus on what you want, so you don't really look into that. And I don't really buy into that fully, because then I'm not creating a solution. I feel like one of the best answers I've heard was from a guest I've had on recently. I can't remember his name, Will, apologies, Will, but Will something. And he basically said, be aware of it, but don't wear it. So be aware of that suffering and create a solution, but don't wear it. And I feel like the people who are a little bit more compassionate, a little bit more empathetic, they tend to wear it, especially when they see it like, oh my goodness, what can I do? I can't end starvation for everybody. I'm going to end starvation for one person. And so I'm just curious if you can speak on the emotional element or what we can do to actually affect these positive changes.
I think first it starts with coming to an acceptance within yourself that you're alive. And you start by, looking in the mirror and recognizing that you are part and parcel of the universe, not just a thing that's happening here. And, self-awareness is an unbelievable gift. And I consider every single human a true miracle, whether they're a good person or a bad person. There's no duplicate copy of them in the entire universe. And so I think every single person is a miracle, and every single person is a change maker. You make change just literally by what you do. Every single thing you say is the first time you say it. Every single breath you take is the first time you take that breath, and you'll never take it again. Every action you make is an action that you'll never do again. And it's the nature of just how the universe fundamentally works. And so at some point, we collectively have to wake up. And you don't wake up through a mass awakening like it's spoken about in other kinds of mythologies. People wake up when they're ready to. And so the first thing is you got to be willing to take a look at the world for what it is in the moment that you decide to wake up. It's like same thing when you get born. You're in the womb of the belly, and then I believe you become born to the womb of the earth. And at some point you open your eyes and you look around you and you say, holy cow, this is the earth I'm really living in, not the one that's in here that I'm making up inside my head that's being propagandized and filled with a whole bunch of misinformation. Like, wait, I'm living in the world that's being propagandized, filled with a whole bunch of misinformation. And I got to wake up to that and deal with it. And then I have to face this thing called the heart, because the heart freaks out at that moment. The brain will spaz. The brain will, completely lose it in the face of what it's going to see. And it's, you said words, you just tossed them out there. And to me, they make me want to cringe, like human trafficking. No, that's slavery. Like, hello. I thought we all agreed to abolish that. No, it's at record numbers. It's insanity. It's absolute insanity. And so, through this idea that you can whitewash language and just change the name of the category of it, and then people are all going to forget about it through some kind of, blinding that's put on us. Ultimately, people wake up from that, and you have to be able to realize it and look at it and say, yeah, that's really happening. And then the heart has to come into play, because otherwise the brain mind will get scared and freak out. And so you got to do a lot of work on the heart. And we've just done very little work on it as a collective. We spend a lot of time training the brain. We've spent a lot of time in, the most recent part of our evolution, going to school to train this tool. And we've left the heart out, and the heart has more importance in the mystical aspects of us and in the supernatural, spiritual, energetic, natural expressions of us more than just beating blood. It's not just pumping blood and having kind of a mechanical, physical nature. And people know that when it sort of magically turns on, and it happens in spiritual awakenings, and it happens in different kinds of romantic situations, or in the presence of other kinds of animals, or in the presence of people's own children. a lot of people have said they've had this sort of magical heart awakening that happens. And so that has to become part of our everyday life, that this organ and this stability from within can handle this intensity of things like human trafficking and starvation and, disease and stuff that's happening all around the world. And then what change do we make? Well, I think you start to make the change with intention. And I think everything ultimately starts from intention. And so once you can become aware of it, look at it and not react to it, but know that it's real. So it's not put your head in the sand. It's look right at it and know that it's happening. Be able to look at the statistics and stay stable. Be able to understand what's happening in the real world around us and be okay with it in the sense of a kind of neutrality, but an understanding that now you want to do something about that. Then you can start to set the intention to do something about it. That's where it all starts from, and you can make that decision. And then there's, I think, a myriad of ways that the help ultimately comes together. And it's not just one way, and it's not just help one starving person, and it's not just work at a soup kitchen, and it's not just, help an NGO or make a donation. It ultimately, I think, is an interweb of our own consciousness to agree to make this change together. And the thought leaders that are about it will show up, and the people who really organize groups well will start organizing those kinds of groups. And the people that will, talk about it behind the scenes will talk about it. And you would ultimately find your place within that web, doing something that would help make that change. And I personally think that most of the things that have already been created don't work. So sort of my greatest criticism of the effort that's been done to try to make this change is that it's ultimately been ineffective at a total state. It's effective in helping in certain kinds of ways, but it certainly hasn't, stopped any of the great atrocities that we're facing collectively as humanity. And so while we've had a lot of support and help along the way, and there's a lot more to come, there's still obviously a lot more to learn and a lot more to do. And so I think when I see that, instead of getting down about it, I just think, well, that's in the evolution of our species. It's in our infancy, to start to really care about all the people we don't know. It's just not common. Most people care about the people that they know, and the people they don't know are just completely unimportant to them. And so I think having a greater imagination and openness towards, the fact that we're all in this together is just now starting to become more important in certain parts of the collective consciousness, and that will ultimately grow. And as you set your intention to now help make that change and to be part of that change, you'll naturally find your place within it. And it might take longer than you think. It might be a harder path than you think. The sacrifices that you may agree to because of the desire to be part of that change, kind of unknown until you're part of it and you're deciding to ultimately do something about it, but they will happen. The intention guides us in this life, and it sends us in a direction and a path, and it ultimately guides us to who we meet and who we talk to, and that grows in its own natural way. And the intraweb of humanity and consciousness has now unified in the form of technology, which is how we could have this kind of conversation from all over the world and also share similar thoughts at the same time. And so the tools are there, and now it's about bringing those tools together. And I think it ultimately is a change that comes from lots of people being interested in seeing that change and participating in it. And in reality, I think we're in its infancy.
Well, man, that was a beautiful and extraordinary answer. I just want to throw huge questions at you and just sit back and listen, because that was epic. So I want to move it a little bit into like the Dieta and what you're doing with the Trinity Retreat program. But before I want to do that, I want to get weirder and just get your feedback on it. With doing ayahuasca and DMT, and there's a lot of people who listen to Joe Rogan. I know that Aubrey Marcus just wrote about you again. He holds you in high regard. So I guess that you were his shaman for a lot of experiences, and anyone's your shaman. If they're the one holding space for you, that's like, all right, you are like my hero forever. Like I was in the abyss. You made sure I came back. Like, you're my hero. So, I definitely see why the respect is there. I remember my shaman, little tiny, he was so tiny, but so powerful, man. It was so good. And, his English was broken, but like, it was always the most profound it was always some of the most profound and humbling experiences. And so to kind of get off that track, some people say they communicate with beings, right? They say, some people are saying they're actually using different psychedelics and mushrooms or different things to say, this is how we get on that frequency to connect to actual beings that are giving us communication. Now, because I've done these things, I'm like, you know what? Maybe down with that, possibly. On the flip side of that, one of the Native Americans I worked with, he said, don't change your consciousness because of you want to know what's real or not real. And I thought, oh, maybe it could be, like, maybe that could be negative. And I was like, well, it depends. It could open stuff up, right? Because you're in a whole new portal of a different space you don't understand. But also a lot of people in that portal are getting tremendous healing, and it's breaking, like I say, is like people make a mental map of the world and they'll have a rut that they live their entire life with. And ayahuasca or mushrooms can slap that rut right off your face immediately. You know what I mean? In the right scenario. And so my question to you is, do you think that it could potentially open up a doorway to connect with beings? If so, could those beings be good or bad? You've had more experiences than most people, so maybe you actually can kind of open that doorway and say, oh, hey, like now we can understand this language. You called it supernatural. And Terrence McKenna talks about experiences with beings, but also I think what did he do one time? He like took a bunch of acid and then he smoked DMT, like so much of it. It was like, then I was in the realm with the elves. I was like, yeah, of course you were. And I was like,
I don't recommend that. I don't recommend that.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I don't know if you've ever heard him talk about that, but he just says this like, oh my God. He was like, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, like times 10, man. Terrence McKenna was intense. But I was like, I can totally see how that might be possible, and it wouldn't surprise me. And so with that rant, I'm wondering if you can ground that out a little bit, because what I prefer with the shamans and people wanting, because people will still ask me about ayahuasca and different things, I'm like, you need to go to a place where they respect it, and it's about ceremony and the diet and why you're doing it. What intention are you bringing? And that changes the whole experience. And it's so fundamentally important as a part of it. And now all those other things of possibility, I'm just curious, what your take is on it.
Well, that is the rabbit hole. So, I appreciate that. And I'm happy to talk about it. I've been talking about it actually for years. So, that's what got me into this, is that I started seeing beings. So I, in my early 20s, had a spiritual awakening, and in it, I started to see beings and had that deep question: is this real? Is this not real? What's going on? And I went to a shaman and a psychologist, and both told me what was going on was real, and that I was fine, and that I was grounded, and what I needed to do was figure it out. And so I ended up in the Amazon, and the easiest way to talk about seeing beings in the Amazon is that it is considered completely normal, not abnormal. So it just flips it literally right on its head. And the Amazonian shamanic medicines and the Amazonian shamanic practices of the people that are called medico-vegetalistas, they're not called shamans. Shamans is a Western word that is brought in to try to describe these doctors of the forest, or these mystic doctors of the forest. And they go by the name medico-vegetalista, which just means doctor of plants or doctor of vegetation. And they have a very clear mythology and belief about the nature of how their medicine works. And so they say the plants are alive, and the plants that are medicinal plants have doctor spirits or doctor beings. And you go into a visionary realm, and the medico-vegetalista or the shaman has made friends with these doctor spirits or doctor beings. And the shaman is going to call to the doctor spirits through the chants called Icaros, and is going to invoke them and bring them into the ceremony. And those are the beings that are going to perform the healings and the different kinds of transformations that people are going to experience. And so they have literally zero separation in the idea of the beings from the plants themselves, and the plants themselves having an anthropomorphized expression of that being. So meaning the beings can represent themselves in geometric colors and patterns, and they can represent themselves in completely human form or humanoid form or animal form, depending on the nature of the plant itself. And they are common. They are understood in a pantheon of entities, just like your polytheistic religions, like Hinduism has a pantheon of deities that are known about, or your ancient Greek religions have a pantheon of deities or demigods that are believed in. These quote unquote beings or spirits of the forest, of these medicinal plants are all cataloged. They are named. They are known. The lineages pass down the ability to communicate with them in a very sacred language called Icaro from one generation to another generation. And it's how the medicine ultimately gets practiced. And like I said, it is considered 100% completely, totally normal and part of the mystery and the mysticism of the Amazon itself. Those beings are typically seen in visions, in a visionary state where you get into this kind of clarity of consciousness. It's not like being wasted on a drug. You get into this hyper lucid state of consciousness. And it's like your senses can now take in billion times more than they used to be able to take in. And there's lots of people who've tried to describe this in all different kinds of phenomena. It's very hard to explain, but it's like your hearing becomes super hearing, your smell becomes super smell, your sight becomes super sight, your feeling becomes super feeling, and the distance that you can perceive seems to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow and grow to be much larger than even the physical space around you. And typically within that space, there is this matrix of energy, like I said, like the patterns behind me, but in a multi-D formation. And within them, they can turn into all different kinds of shapes. So they can become tunnels. They can move, they can swirl, they can be very psychedelic, they can be still, they can pulse with the beats and the rhythms of the ceremonies themselves. And it's through that matrix that these quote unquote beings take shape and form. And so you can see it like there's geometry there, and then all of a sudden the geometry looks like a person, and then the person starts to take a greater amount of shape, and then all of a sudden it's like the person's talking to you, but the person doesn't have to speak to you verbally. It's like the person can communicate literally within your mind. And the hardest part to differentiate in that moment is that being separate from me, or is that being actually a part of me? And I think at that state of consciousness, when you're that open in your consciousness, it's like Venn diagrams. It's like overlaps. It's not like there's you and there's me and there's two minds, but it's like there's one mind where within you, there is the center of your mind, and within me, there's the center of my mind, and they're kind of overlapped. And in that overlap is where these entities or beings are hanging out. They're part of the collective consciousness. You could make the statement that they are truly individualized from us, but no one ever sees them except for the people seeing them. So how could you ultimately distinguish? It becomes a paradoxical impossibility to be able to distinguish that thing independent of human consciousness, because it's human consciousness that's seeing that thing, talking about that thing, and, supposedly interacting with that thing. Now, in my own experience, I've seen now literally, it's hard to explain the numbers, but let's say, just to approximate, millions of different kinds. So literally millions of different classifications of them. And in a typical ceremony, when you're working with 30, 40, 50 people, as the shaman in the ceremony, you're going to work with multitudes of them, literally in the numbers of billions. And when people start to hear that, they think that that's completely insane until they're actually in the experience and they're having it, and then they're all there. And not only are they literally considered part of the medicine and the practice, they're also considered to have hierarchical powers of control over other versions of those spirits. They're called head medicine spirits. They're also given names. They're called Sincharunas and Ayarunas. And those spirits have the ability to manage a whole bunch of these other kinds of beings. So you could call on in the ceremony a Sincharuna or an Ayaruna of head medicine spirit of a certain kind of tree. like Anakaspi, which is the name of a tree, or Shiwawaku, which is the name of a tree. And then you could have now the multitudes, literally hundreds of thousands of that kind of spirit, just like there's millions and millions of that tree growing in the forest, ultimately show up to come to the ceremony. And people will literally see them in ceremony together. The next day they'll talk about them, they'll describe them, they'll paint them, they will draw them, and they will have not come from any kind of mythology that they have experienced on their own. So they literally will be something unlike anything that they've ever seen before. So the first time they ever had an interaction with this kind of shape of this kind of quote unquote being was in a visionary space. So it's not that their mind's making it up coming from, some ancient text that they looked at or some visionary art that they saw or something like that. It literally is first contact in the visionary realm and now bringing that from the visionary realm into the physical space and creating an effigy or a kind of artwork or something to depict or describe, or creating words and story to try to depict and describe those kinds of beings. So that's the biggest question that you asked. You could talk about this literally probably for 100 hours and keep picking it apart. I think if you trip out way too hard, which I don't ever recommend, and I don't recommend the hero dose. I don't recommend doing that in those ways. There are very few people who are who are capable of that and can stay sane and okay through those kinds of experiences. And because they're capable of that, very much like anyone else who has kind of a super capacity, it's very easy to recommend that to somebody else, because to you, it's just normal. You're just like, oh yeah, try that thing. It worked for me. But most people do not have the ability to keep their psyche together through those kinds of experiences. And so, the sort of Terence McKenna expression of going to the point where you see the elves or you see the gnomes, et cetera, is very real. I've seen many different beings that look like that. And I actually have some really interesting stories about those kinds of beings. We actually had one come home with us once after an experience and decide to hide things all around our house, which is a pretty interesting story. Until we took it back to its home and learned that it's never a good idea to bring one of those things back into suburbia. I think the responsibility that you mentioned is unbelievably important, and those beings are not always good. And that's, I think, something that's really important to understand. The people who train in these kinds of visionary arts, learn how to pick apart that it's kind of visionary soup, this intramix of a lot of different visions and a lot of different things like beings. And they learn to, have the good ones there to help you and the bad ones there to get them out or to keep them away from the ceremony. And the people who are not proficient enough, who are wielding this, or people who do this on their own, who get caught up in those kinds of beings, can often have a really bad experience and then a very lingering bad experience after it and not understand why. And, I understand that it is not part of the popular culture to really talk about these beings, but I think it's really important because they are part and parcel of psychedelic experiences. Lots and lots of people have talked about them. And if they're in the visionary art, I think they need to become part of what is spoken about within the psychedelic cultures, and accept the fact that in the traditional societies, they are part of what makes a shaman capable of healing and or powerful. Without the medicine beings, there are no shamans, and there is no healing. And so the shamans all agree that they learn from those beings. Those beings literally teach them how to wield them. And it's through the ability to wield them that they perform their healing. And it is not just localized to that specific ceremony. They are considered to be real beyond that. And in my own life, I've had so many different experiences of them. It's just, like I said, a part of normalcy.
God damn. I asked the right question. I love, holy shit. Now I just want to go, all the way in and stay here until the morning and just keep asking,
We can go one more. I'll tell you, I got lost.
Okay.
I'll tell you a quick story. Okay. I got lost. I got lost in the Amazon once. Okay. This is a place you don't want to be lost. All right. For real.
Yeah.
Like you can get lost in a city, right? And you can ask someone for help, but I got alone lost in the Amazon. I was like a good hour and a half away from my lodge, which was base camp. And I was in primary forest by myself. Okay. I decided to go out hiking on my own and I got off trail and I was bushwhacking. And all of a sudden I turned around and I was lost. I could not tell where I had come from. I could not tell which direction it was. I had no compass. I had no GPS. I had no map. I had literally nothing but some Mapacho tobacco. All right. Now, Mapacho tobacco is a kind of ceremonial tobacco that they use in the Amazon. It's considered a medicinal plant. It's used in ceremony. It's part of the typical ceremonies themselves. And there is the belief of a being that's called the Chuyachaki. All right. The Chuyachaki is considered to be sort of a gnome, kind of dwarf spirit of the forest. You can look up the Chuyachaki online. There's mythology all throughout the Amazon of the Chuyachaki, and the Chuyachaki is considered to know everything about the forest. There is these areas of the forest that are considered to be the areas of those spirits. It's where that spirit is seen by lots of people, not just seers or visionary people, but this is a well-known mythology of the forest. And I was literally lost. I could not have screamed. I could not have shouted. I could not have banged wood. I could not have made a signal fire. I could have literally done nothing to get help from where I was. I was in such an isolated place. And so I sat down and I literally decided to use the Chuyachaki spirit to get me out of the forest. So this is a real life survival scenario. Nightfall is coming. This is, life and death danger in the forest. And so I know from the mythology that the Chuyachaki likes the tobacco. So I take out one of the Mapacho tobaccos for him. Or it. So, I mean, I don't know the gender of it. It doesn't really have a gender, but so I say, okay, this is for you. And I put it down on the ground as an offering and I light one for myself. And I say, I'm going to sit here and smoke this until you tell me where to go. So about halfway through smoking this Mapacho, I hear clearly ringing in my head, loud, but in my head, not like a voice from outside my head, ringing in my head, go to the right. That's all I hear from where I'm sitting. Go to the right. So I know you can walk in a circle and not know it. So I mark that tree with a machete. Yeah. So I have a machete and I mark the tree and I start going. And I go about 10, 15 minutes and I come to one of those areas that's considered one of those areas of the Chuyachaki spirit in the forest. This is an area of the forest I'd never been in before. Had no idea that it was there. I was not on, like I said, there was no trail. I was literally going just through the forest, cutting my way with a machete through it. I sit down, I notch another tree there to make sure it's not the same place that I started. And I get told, keep going, but now go a little bit to the left, but keep going kind of straight. And now a little bit to the left. I walk about another 10, 15 minutes and I come to another place of this forest, what's called the area of the Chuyachaki. And you can tell because of a certain kind of plant that lives there. This process went on for 4 times over about 45 minutes. And I kept following exactly what I had been hearing, right? Same voice that I had heard in the ceremonies when the shamans would call this kind of spirit to the ceremony. And I had, made friends with the spirit. So I'm trusting this, but I'm also completely scared off my face that I'm just lost in the forest. And, this is literally life and death. It is literally a very dangerous place. And so I continue to follow the Chuyachaki voice. And after the 4th time, I go to the forest of the Chuyachaki, never the same one twice. I come broadside into a trail. And it was the first time in 45 minutes I had seen a trail. And it was definitely a human trail. This was, less than a meter wide, but definitely a well-trodden human trail. And the joy that went through me, the elation that hit at that moment blew out the connection that I had. And I didn't even think, am I supposed to go left or am I supposed to go right onto this trail? And so I just walked left. And I am not kidding. I hear ringing out louder in the angriest voice you can imagine. Hey, dumbass, it's the other direction. Literally. So I stop and I turn around. Literally, I'm not kidding. I can't believe it, right? I'm called literally a dumbass. And I stop. I turn around. I walk down that path. It takes me 10 minutes and I come to a fork in the road to a trail that I knew. And I literally from that point walked straight back to my camp. And I got there right before nightfall. And one of those beings called the Chiachakwi walked me right out of the forest. No kidding. Happened. True story. It was in my first year in the Amazon. And after that, I had no doubts about this whatsoever. The most amazing thing about the forest story, though, is that I went to the locals and I told them, and they know that part of the forest, you know, they've lived out there for generations. They know that part of the forest. And they told me that in their understanding of that part of the forest, there's only one of the areas where there is that area of the forest called the chakra of the Chiachaki. There's only one area and I saw 4. So I have no way to know whether they were or they were not. I have no way to know whether I was in a visionary trance, but I did mark each one so that I would know that I was not in the same place. And I did make sure that rationally I was in a new place each time. And I did follow literally directly that voice that was clear and only that voice that was telling me exactly where to go. And it walked me without failure right out of the forest and back to my lodge.
Wow, bro. Well, that is an astonishing story. And I can relate to it because I've had experiences where it's life or death. Now, I didn't have a being walk me out, but the presence and the awareness you feel when you're like, oh, shit, I am going to die. If this does not go correctly, I am in a seriously bad situation. And you have to focus all your energy on trusting something. You know what I mean? If you're religious, if you believe in God, you're calling it God, Buddha, you know, your aunt, whoever, because you're like, this is serious business. So we need to update the education for the Boy Scouts and the Girl Guides. Like, you don't even need your navigation or compass. Give you a couple Mapacho cigarettes. You sit down, light these up. Doesn't matter where you are. You're totally fine. You get yourself. Works 100% of the time. You just gotta wait. Be perfect.
That's funny. Life and death definitely will make you invoke. It will make you start invoking for sure.
Yeah. And, you know, I think that's one of the things, you know, psychedelic medicine can bring, or that seriousness to life, right? You talked a little bit earlier about, you know, like being alive, like recognizing that you're alive. I feel like many people are alive, but they're not fully living. They're not really engaging. You know, I'm actually coaching somebody right now, a super talented musician, a young DJ, really smart. You know, when DJ people think about like, I don't know, like, maybe it's my own mentality of like the DJs like going around, but this kid is like, he's different. He loves music. He's a producer. He's educated. And so he's like selling me the last little bit about, how he's going to go to do more tech. He learned about computers. Now he's going to do a little bit more tech so he can get more money. So then he can go back to music. And for like 2 months, I've been basically like, and I'm not going to tell him what to do. I'm just giving him exercises to reflect and whatever. And recently, sadly, one of his friends has died. And we were talking today and he's like, yeah, man, I realized like, you know, I got to engage in, you know, what I'm passionate about and, you know, really design it. And that requires some faith, right? To design what you're uniquely here to do, to be fully alive, to pursue that. You need to kind of call out to the universe. Right? You need to call him like, please show me a way to do this podcast. You know, please show me a way to be able to travel to Egypt because I need to go to Egypt with these people. And this trip is $12,000 and I am a broke snowboard bum and I have a podcast and it's basically volunteer. I can't go. You got to show me a way. And it's incredible how, what do you want to call it? Like the Chiachaki fella or whatever it is. It's something that you're communing with something bigger than you. Right. And so I feel like that's such a lost experience on the general population. We're such in ease and also following the path of like following the fish. Get what's safe. Just continue to follow the line. Don't really question, you know, just follow that protocol. And a lot of times people get sick or they have a midlife crisis. Then they go see you And, they have these experiences to reconnect to spirit, to reconnect to themselves, to reconnect with this communion, with something greater. So it doesn't necessarily need to be something specific like this particular God or this particular entity. It is the expression of that humility of something bigger. I need some help. And it seems to be in times of crisis, people will go to that space, but I feel like that space and that energy is always with us. And it's always willing to engage, and it's always willing to guide us. And I feel like living in that way, like making your life the prayer, is a much more empowering and beautiful place to live. Not a question. You want to comment?
No, I mean, I just like the idea of living within the prayer. That's just such a beautiful way of saying that, just living within the prayer, turning to that something greater is source. I mean, where do we come from? Ask the big questions. Where do we come from? It's easy to be self-identified. It's easy to know your reflection in the mirror, but how did you really happen? And what is this great evolution that turned space dust into the earth itself? I like to ask people when we're on retreat how old they are, and I like to ask them because they always tell me some number in decades. It's the way we've been taught to discuss how old we are, but the matter that makes up the earth itself, the actual molecules, the atoms, are over 12 billion years old. And so that's the same matter that makes up your body right now. So my body, your body, every listener's body is made up of matter that has been here, that has been part of the universe, part of this galaxy for over 12 billion years. It's source matter, and it's what we're actually made of. And so when we have that ability to turn to the universe and ask that big question, what are we? Who are we? Where are we from? Why are we here? What are we doing? And reach out to it for help. The help is there. We're not separate from the rest of the universe. It's easy to think we are. And it simply by just looking at the distances between us and walls or us and another person. But the reality is we are part and parcel of not only the earth, but the earth and the galaxy and the interweb of the totality of what this universe is. And so, we've been taught to think about prayer, and we've been taught to think about spirit in this perspective that it's something that I have to stop the rest of what I'm doing to engage in and be a part of. And I don't see it that way. I see it as an understanding of lifestyle. It's a certain way of approaching life itself. And when you ally yourself and align yourself with source, and you ally yourself with great spirit, or whatever you want to call it, I don't think the words matter at all. I think that's literally symbolic linguistics. It's sapiens making sounds to try to describe something that's beyond the explicable. It's however we all got here together in this life in the first place. So whatever that is to you, regardless, we share the universe. The universe is for all. Here we are together, regardless of how many planets there are, regardless of how big it is, regardless of how many light years people describe it in, or how many years of age they describe it in. It created everything. And that's something that to me is a fundamental miracle. And so I just think that reaching out to that and being part of that and recognizing the source of that and connecting to the creation of that is, it's innate. And when you do that, there is an untold benefit that I think every person that has reached out to in a real way, for support and for help has received. And there are lots of different mythologies, religions, and spiritualities that have discussed how that's supposed to be done. But ultimately, they're all still talking about the same great phenomena. So they're all reaching out to the great phenomena of the creation of this universe in its own right. And I think people will fight and debate over the rationale behind that, but that's missing the point. The point is that it's there for your support and connection and help if you're willing to connect with it. And it's just waiting for you to connect. You're the great gatekeeper of the portal of that connection. And it can be just how you live. It doesn't have to be something else. And I think in a modern life that's so busy already with so many different tasks just to fulfill a day and comply with what's necessitated, when you can use practices that make that part of your daily life, it makes it just that much easier. And so, ultimately that's what we try to share and what we teach is how to be able to make that connection to source and to spirit, something that's just part of daily life as the way that you approach the day instead of something that you have to stop your day to get in contact with. And the people that live in that way feel supported and feel connected by something greater than themselves. And the amount of fear and anxiety that they have is obviously a lot less because they feel a presence of something that is ultimately greater and supportive and loving, kind, and helpful, and makes those kinds of things, like you said, possible. Makes the podcast possible. It makes somebody fulfilling their dreams possible and helps give them guidance and direction. And it can be, because of the mythology, broken down into an individual creature or being or spirit, or because of a religion, it could take the shape of a Buddha, or because of other beliefs, it could, look like an angel. It's really irrelevant, I think. I think all of that's coming from the great source of all that is universe and all that is consciousness. And being willing to turn to that is the true humility and the opening of the heart and the connection that we're really striving for in the first place. So living that prayer, I just think, is a beautiful way of saying, something that I truly support.
Amazing, man. So beautifully and eloquently put. So thanks. As you were chatting there, I was just really enjoying the way that you're putting all that together and just to really understand it's a way of life and not, something you schedule it in, you know what I mean? It's like where our day, so many people's days is a task list, right? And then like, okay, well at 6 or in the morning is my meditation, which is good. You should meditate, right? Or well, you can meditate if you wish. It can be helpful. It's not the only way, but not these stages. Like it's just the way you live. You can bring that presence and power into everything, and that's a really huge distinction. It's very transformative if you kind of get that point. So, yeah, I 100% agree, and I love the way that you phrased it. I want to touch on how you transitioned over there and talk a little bit about plants, because when I've learned from the Native American elders and how they would talk about plants and plant healing. And, how all their medicine came from plants, because that makes sense. That's where medicine came from. Now what we're experiencing in this world, which is very interesting, is, the COVID thing with the vaccines. I never looked into vaccines. Now I did. And there's like a lot of very negative stuff about it. But we have plants that do miraculous healing. And people, my cousin has been on this for a long time. Some of the stuff that she would go get at the health store, she can't get anymore. It's now, labeled that you can't access it. My friend, Dr. Bear Lando, who talked about germ theory and he became well known for curing a lot of people of cancer. And he would never say that. They would just get better. He would never say that because he understood what would happen. He actually had a friend that lost his life because there was 2 doctors and he said, Bear, we're curing people of cancer. And he's like, don't say that. Don't say that. And he goes, one day that guy ended up not living anymore. Something terrible happened to him. And so it's like a real thing. And so Bear, even to send me stuff, he's like, this is what it is, but it's to get around the FDA orcs because they're removing some of these things. So number one, some of these plant medicines and things that we have are being taken off the shelf. 2, if you know anything about Monsanto, and like you can't even, this was years ago now, this is old news, but telling farmers they can't use their own seeds, that they have to go buy these seeds made from someone else. The most unnatural thing you've ever heard of, disconnecting us from the earth and nutrition. And so then you would go to a culture that you're learning from that have thousands of years. I don't know how you could tell me how old their culture is. I don't know, thousands of years of understanding plants and the forest and their connection with life and connection with the land, understanding what these plants do can be miraculous. And that's really where healing come from, and kind of rambling all over. But in 1910, that was a pivotal moment because that's when Rockefeller and Carnegie hijacked modern medicine, because Rockefeller had he was a big oil baron, wanted to put petroleum in pharmaceuticals. And so that's what gave rise, that report in 1910 made anything holistic, natural, medicine, plant, all that stuff that makes perfect sense, Ayurvedic, it made it quackery. And the only way to get better was from a pill or a vaccine. And now we're living in that now. And we have these pharmaceutical companies that are the number one lobbyers in all the governments, including the states, and the number one purchasers of advertising in big media. And so this is a huge issue. And so I just want to kind of say all that to drive the importance of what's possible with medicine, what's possible with plant medicine, as in even just eating a spinach is plant medicine. It might not make you trip out, but it's going to do a ton of positive things for you. So I know that that's what you work with these dietas. And every time I would do an ayahuasca thing, one of my favorite things and least favorite things was doing the diet, but it was always a reset, right? I'd piss around. I'd be drinking too much coffee. You know, my diet would be here and there, but the diet that they recommend, I would always strongly follow. It always reset, and it made me think differently. It changed my digestion. It did so many positive things. It's just a reset. And so often, like I said, we just get into this rut. And people get into these ruts for years and they never change. They never have an opportunity to reset. They're not checking how much sugar they're eating and all this crap. And most of us are eating total nonsense. Even if you think you're eating well on the spectrum of what's possible, it's probably just mediocre. Unless you're one of those, people really know what's going on. That's not me. And so that's kind of my rant. So I want you to just talk a little bit about, what you're doing with the Trinity Retreat program and what you're doing as far as like the diets and helping people understand food.
Sure. Well, first, thank you so much. What we did during this period of time since our center got shut down, Maestro Christian and I got together and we decided to create a program that we call the Trinity Retreat. And you can find it by going to bluemorphoretreats.world. And, so bluemorphoretreats.world, and there you'll find the Trinity Retreat program. We basically take 3 pillars of, mind, body, spirit. So we have the idea of a shamanic dieta, the idea of shamanic ceremonies, and body practices to tie a transformative experience together into one. It's really easy to do just one or the other, but to bring them all together is what really gives the real power to the experience. And so the first aspect of it is the shamanic dieta. And the shamanic dieta does really 2 things. One is it's a detox, which I think, like you said, there's so many other kinds of environmental toxins and poisons and things that we eat that we don't even know that we're taking in, microplastics, all these other things. It's an opportunity to flush the body, flush the system, reset the digestion, reset the organs, and just get everything out of the body that's bad and not working for it anymore. And people find different kinds of fasts and detoxes to be really difficult. And that's where the shamanic aspect of it really comes into play. What we do is we teach you how to use other kinds of plants, natural herbs and flowers that are found literally all over the world. They're 100% legal. Many of them are part of our normal foods like garlic, ginger, turmeric, thyme, rosemary, basil, spinach, like you said. That goes into the juices that people have as part of the cleanse. And we make a tea out of it, just like we do in the Amazon. And we walk everybody through the invocation of the plant spirit, of these natural healing beings that come from the herbs and they come from the flowers. And so it's not only drinking it for the chemical components that are found within it or the vitamins, minerals, etc. It's drinking it for the spirit, just like we talked about already. And we teach you how to be able to do that. So we teach you how to gain the power and the strength of those plants to be able to help you have a relationship with them that gives you the strength to be able to go through the detox experience. And it makes it much easier to go through and also much deeper cleanse. Then in terms of the ceremonies, what we found is that the ceremonies are really powerful using other techniques other than psychedelics. And so there are other kinds of plants that we can use that are almost as powerful, if not as powerful as psychedelic plants in that ceremonial setting to be able to awaken their properties and their spirits as well within the body. And so we utilize Icaros just like in a ayahuasca ceremony or shamanic ceremony in the Amazon. We utilize all of the same connections to the different kinds of healing energies and healing beings that we've been talking about. We bring all of that into ceremony and we teach a kind of breath work that we call Trinity breath work to be able to take somebody into that altered state of consciousness to be able to connect. And we've also found that this is an unbelievably important reset for people that have had experiences with psychedelics that hasn't really gone very well. When it hasn't been positive and there's that lingering effect that is negative for them, or they've ended up with shamans that really didn't have their best interest at heart, we found that this is a process for them to be able to reset that through the dieta and the ceremonies. And then to bring it really to the body, we have then body practices that include yoga, qigong, and our own practice that we call flow chi, which Maestro Christian and I invented as a receptive, restorative practice. And we take you literally step by step through the process. So it starts with an opening lecture and going just through how we use technology to be able to stay connected through the process itself. people can participate from all over the world, which is incredible because before that, people would have to come and find us in the Amazon, which wasn't always so easy or even possible for a lot of people. There are also a lot of people who couldn't participate in these kinds of experiences for different kinds of health reasons, because a lot of the different psychedelic plants have just a real long list of contraindications that you just can't use if you're on different kinds of medicines or if you have other kinds of health concerns. And so this became something that really was available to all if they were interested in these kinds of practices. And so we broadcast them. We've been broadcasting ceremonies and experimenting in the way of being able to utilize the internet as a means of doing these practices and communicating these practices now since 2014. So we have extensive experience broadcasting to people all over the world, and it's fascinating. And I know for some people, it's a hard thing to wrap their head around how you could from home get into this kind of state and into a trance and really experience the presence of the power of the kinds of things we've been talking about. But all I can say is that we've had now thousands of people that have experienced it, and they have unbelievably transformative experiences being able to go into trance, utilizing just the breath work and utilizing the different kinds of plants that are part of the teas. And then we teach you how to harness this life force that's innate and real and part of the plant itself to boost your immune system, to be able to try to use holistic medicine to treat other kinds of health concerns that you have, and to be able to spiritually and energetically cleanse. It's a reset. It's a total mind, body, spirit cleanse, and it's a reawakening for you, and something that we found to be unbelievably powerful. It happened because of this huge disrupt that we went through in terms of our own center, but the beauty of it is that it's going to be something that we continue to offer well after whatever goes on in the transformations that are going to take place with businesses like ours and COVID, because no one really knows whenever they'll start again. And, so these online retreats is something that we're going to continue doing now into the future, since we've had such an incredible response from people that have been on them. It's amazing to see and hear about transformations from all over the world happening at the same time. So the last retreat we did, we had people from over 15 countries participate in it, which is, incredible in its own right. And it's also amazing to be able to share this wisdom from the Amazon. Like you said, it is thousands and thousands of years. No one knows exactly how long, but it is at least 5,000 to 10,000 years, and if not longer, of unbroken lineages and traditions, understanding the way plants have medicinal and curative properties. And so we walk you step by step through that experience. It doesn't matter how much of a beginner or how much of an expert you are. We go into it together, and it's an opportunity and a community of people that are like-minded, that are filled with heart and love and positivity to get through this idea of isolation and separation to an interconnectedness, both of consciousness and mind, and to share that in an opportunity to promote our natural health and the well-being of our mind, body, and spirit, and to boost the immune system.
Amazing, man. That sounds wonderful. Sounds really cool. And, it's interesting because there's so much out there on diets, health, green juice, vegans, cleanses, you name it, right? But immediately when you talk about the plants and what you're doing, it just sounds like a whole level deeper. You know what I mean? And it sounds more grounded and more appealing to me anyway. But, it's just kind of my way of thinking. I like to go grassroots, and it seems like it's just a deeper understanding of plants and what you're capable of with a community that's like not looking for the fad. I guess that's the big distinction, right? There's all like the green juices, which they might be excellent. I don't know. I'm not knocking them. Just what I'm saying is it's like they hype it up and they've got the slogan, got your 12 superfoods in there and it's all going to be good. And maybe it might be so, but this seems just so much deeper, so much more grounded, and I feel like more empowering. So it sounds amazing to me. Man, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Just listening to your answers really makes me reflect, and I enjoy it. Is there anything that you wish that I had asked you or that you want to chat about before we close it? And then I'll also make sure, let people know where they can find you and all the information and stuff like that.
Sure. I think the other thing I would just like to talk about is the the fact that, psychedelic experiences and the positive aspects of them have been spoken about a ton around the world during really the last 10 years. There's been a huge explosion of interest in those kinds of experiences. And kind of like talking about the beings, there's also taboo about talking about the difficulties that people have had. And there are unbelievable miraculous stories out there of people that have obviously seen the brighter side of that. And there's also a lot of people that have had experiences that, have been really difficult and traumatic in their own right. And I just want to let you know that there is a way to get past that, and there is a way to heal that. And what we do with the Trinity Retreats is a means to be able to help you get past that. And it doesn't require psychedelics. When somebody has those kinds of experiences in the Amazon and they need to be healed, they get healed first through that idea of dieta. And it's something that's part of thousands of years of tradition as the way to reset after these kinds of experiences if they haven't gone well for you. And so I just want you to know that there's support and help out there for you. And it's okay if the experiences weren't 100% positive, or if it seems like there's some kind of lingering negative effect, because you can reset from that and you can heal from that and you can move on from it. And like I said, that's something that we do and that we focus on as a way of helping people. And so, if you've had that experience, please check us out so that you can get the help that you need. And we would love to be able to be there for you.
That's amazing, man. Well, that's incredibly rare. I've heard of those experiences before. Obviously, going to Burning Man a few times, there's a lot of psychedelics in that realm, and maybe not in the most ceremonial capacity, that's for sure. And to have people who understand that and can provide a solution for it, I think is massive, because I've heard a lot of those stories and I don't know how the heck to help them. It's like, that's beyond mine. I was like, you shouldn't, same with ayahuasca. Someone was asking me like, oh, where should I go? I was like, all I know is you need to get a fantastic shaman. You need to get the best shaman. Do not piss around with, a weekend person. It is not, and you better be serious, and you better not be doing this for some sort of carnival ride because you want to see something cool, because that is probably not going to be what's going to happen to you. So, if you go in like that. So yeah, that's incredibly important work. And I'm very glad that you're out there to provide that kind of a service. And just a quick side note, if people are listening to this, they should just check it out on YouTube, because if you stare at your face long enough with that art behind you, you turn into like some sort of like purple angel wings with like some sort of thing. Cause that the crazy psychedelic art, those like, those images you stare at for too long, it's too trippy. I start to trip out just listening and talking to you. So it's kind of a fun experience. You can add that to the experience if you're listening to the show. But man, this has been great. I appreciate you and your work. I hope that things work out over there. If there's anything I can do to help, like I guess Andreas kalcker's got some great, stuff with the chlorine dioxide. There's 10,000 doctors underneath them. I know that they're preventing hydroxychloroquine, which also had really great results for healing. And part of the potentially negative thing was that you have to lift the Emergencies Act if there's potential solutions. But hydroxychloroquine and chlorine dioxide from Andreas kalcker have verified cases of having really fantastic results for healing. And so if that is indeed true, we need more doctors to be aware of that, to be able to prescribe it. Because I actually just had a friend say that her sister was a nurse. They forced her to wear a mask for 3 months, and her sister said she was starting to feel sick. And I looked into the masks, and a lot of them are made in China, dipped with ethylene oxide, and which is a chemical, right? Obviously stupid. And so in small amounts, totally fine. But if you're wearing a mask 12 hours a day with a little bit of ethylene oxide, you're going to get poisoning. And what happened to her sister is like, it follows what happened if you look at ethylene oxide poisoning, and she ended up dying. And so we need,
Wow.
It's scary times all over, and we really need to be able to empower ourselves to make our own health choices. And we need good people with solutions to access them. And so she said she couldn't get hydroxychloroquine to her sister because they wouldn't allow it. And so I'm just, we're in some interesting times, but it's good to know that there's great people like you out there. It's transformative times, right? We have an opportunity to help, to get out of our own way, to look for solutions and be a part of that solution. And it's a great opportunity for all of us, and hopefully for humanity to transform and extend their compassion to all suffering that we can see. And how do we transform ourselves? so that we can make that impact. So we can maybe make that little bit of a solution in our community. If at least we can't help, don't harm, So, as far as our vocation and our livelihood, that's something I think even just very important there. If we all got very clear on what our vocation is, who we are, how we'd like to give back, how we'd like to live our lives, how we could support, all of this other stuff would kind of go away. So, or at least be diminished greatly. So, my friend, I'm just rambling on again, but thank you so much. Where do people find your stuff? Did you say your website?
Yeah, come to bloommorphoretreats.world. And you can see everything that's going on with the Trinity Retreats and our different programs there. We also have an unbelievable ton of free material there, as well as we have the Trinity Scholarship Program. And we created a scholarship program during this time so that literally we would not turn anybody away. So you can come and participate in a Trinity Retreat with us. Regardless of your financial situation, we have people that are helping support. So if you can help support others, please do. And other people are receiving from that, and we're changing lives. And so bloommorphoretreats.world, and everyone is welcome. Literally everyone. We're growing a community of people that are taking the power back of our own healing. And it's all based in positivity and the power of the plants and the love that we have for each other and the universe. And, like you said, turning to that great creation and great spirit as a means of life direction and support. So if that sounds good, please come and join us. And it's always a pleasure. Thanks so much, Matt.
Yeah, fantastic, brother Hamilton. You're a gem, my friend. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and we'll have to get you back on on a weekly show to just talk about the beings and what they're saying and what their names are. Maybe somebody's got to categorize them, and maybe they want to be out there, and they can just talk about their race and what they're doing and how we communicate. So we're gonna need a host for that. I'm super down. So let me know, man. But always
Absolutely.
a pleasure.
Yeah. And next time, anytime you want, I'm happy to be on your show and chat. And if you want to have one that goes deep into the essence of the shamanic practices, I'd be happy to talk all about that. It'd be a real pleasure.
Done deal. Sounds good. Okay, brother. Have a great day.
All right. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
See ya. Bye, guys. Peace.